Hello.
I never thought my badge would give me more respect than my wedding ring. After years of my wife treating me like a glorified babysitter with a paycheck, I stopped fighting for her attention and became exactly what she wanted, just a co-parent. When other women started noticing the new me, suddenly my wife remembered I existed. My name is Connor Roberts. I'm 43 years old, and I've been a police officer with the Chicago PD for almost 20 years now. I met Allison during a routine patrol near her dance studio. Some punk kids were harassing her students, and I stepped in. She thanked me with coffee, and that coffee turned into dinner. And before I knew it, I was head over heels for this incredible dancer with the most infectious laugh I'd ever heard. We got married after dating for 2 years. It was a small ceremony, just close friends and family. Allison looked breathtaking in her simple white dress, her eyes gleaming with promises of forever. We bought our first home in a quiet suburb, a modest three-bedroom that we planned to fill with children and laughter. For the first few years, we were inseparable. Even with my unpredictable shifts and her late hours at the dance studio, we always found time for each other. Date nights were sacred, whether it was trying a new restaurant downtown or just curling up on the couch with takeout and a movie. We talked about everything, big and small. I'd tell her about my day on patrol, and she'd share stories about her dance students. We'd stay up late, planning our future, dreaming about the family we'd have. When our son Ethan came along, we were ecstatic. 2 years later, we welcomed our daughter Lily. Allison decided to put her career on hold to raise our kids, saying she didn't want to miss a moment of their childhood. I supported her decision fully, picking up extra shifts when needed to make sure we stayed comfortable financially. Life was good. Hectic but good. I come home from a long shift to find Allison with the kids, sometimes exhausted but always happy. We put the kids to bed together, and then have that precious time just for us. I never saw the change coming. It happened so gradually that by the time I noticed, our marriage had already begun to slip away, like sand through my fingers. The first real sign something was off happened after Lily's 5th birthday party. The house was quiet after a day of screaming kids and sugar-fueled chaos. I was cleaning up the last of the wrapping paper when Allison came downstairs in her pajamas. She looked exhausted. "Kids finally asleep?" I asked, tossing the trash bag aside. She nodded, barely looking my way as she grabbed a glass of water. Finally, Ethan fought me on brushing his teeth again. I moved behind her, slipping my arms around her waist like I'd done 1,000 times before. "You were amazing today. The party was perfect." For a split second, she leaned back against me, and everything felt normal. Then she stiffened and stepped away. "I'm exhausted, Connor. I just want to sleep." It wasn't the first time she'd been too tired, but something in her voice was different. There was an edge there, almost like irritation at my touch. I brushed it off. Planning Lily's party had been stressful, and Allison had handled most of it while I worked a double shift the day before. But in the weeks that followed, that moment replayed in my mind as similar scenarios kept happening. Every time I tried to kiss her, hold her hand, or suggest we watch a movie after the kids were in bed, she'd have an excuse ready. "I need to fold this laundry. I promised I'd call my sister. I'm just so wiped out from chasing the kids all day." Each excuse on its own made perfect sense. Raising 2 kids is exhausting, but the pattern was becoming undeniable. One night, after 3 weeks of sleeping beside a wife who might as well have been a stranger, I tried again. "Oh, can we talk?" I asked as she climbed into bed, immediately picking up her phone. "About what?" She didn't look up from her screen. "About us. We haven't connected in weeks." She sighed heavily, like I was bringing up something trivial. "Connor, it's just a phase. We have 2 young kids. This is normal. Is it normal to feel like my wife can barely stand to be touched by me?" That got her attention. She finally put her phone down. "That's not fair. I'm just tired all the time. Ethan's been having nightmares. Lily's going through a clingy phase. I spend all day being needed by little people. By the end of the day, I have nothing left to give." I understood her words, but they still stung. "I miss you, that's all." "I'm right here," she said, but her tone suggested she was anywhere but. Later that night, I lay awake next to her sleeping form, trying to remember the last time she'd initiated any kind of intimacy. It had been months. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Something was slipping away, and I had no idea how to grab hold of it. After weeks of growing distance, I decided to tackle the problem head on. I'd never been one to shy away from difficult situations. Not when I was the first officer through the door on a domestic violence call. Not when I took a bullet in the shoulder protecting a witness 2 years ago. And definitely not now, when my marriage was at stake. I arranged for my mother to take the kids for the weekend, a rare opportunity for Allison and me to have the house to ourselves. I made reservations at Kingston Mines, the blues club where we had our third date. I even bought tickets to a dance performance I knew she'd been interested in. This would be our chance to reconnect. When I told Allison about my plans, her reaction wasn't what I expected. This weekend, she frowned, scrolling through her phone. I was going to meet up with Katie and Jen for brunch on Saturday. Brunch takes, 2 hours? We'd still have the rest of the weekend, I said, trying to keep my tone even. She sighed dramatically. I don't know, Connor. I was looking forward to having some time to myself with the kids gone. That stung. Time to herself meant time away from me. I took a deep breath. Allison, we need this. When's the last time we spent any real time together? We spend time together every day, she said dismissively. Passing each other in the kitchen while you pack lunches and I head to work isn't spending time together, I countered. I'm talking about us, you and me, not mommy and daddy. Something flashed across her face. Irritation, maybe even resentment. Maybe I don't have the energy to be anyone but mommy right now. I stood my ground. This isn't a request, Allison. We're doing this. Our marriage needs it. The weekend was a disaster. At dinner, Allison kept checking her phone. At the blues club, she complained about the noise. During the dance performance, the only time she showed any emotion was when she criticized the lead dancer's technique. On Sunday morning, I finally laid it all out. I was sitting at the kitchen table, coffee in hand, while Allison unloaded the dishwasher, the clatter of plates punctuating the silence between us. I think we should see a marriage counselor, I said firmly. The plate in her hand froze midair. Excuse me. We're not okay. Allison, we haven't been for months. She set the plate down with controlled precision. We're fine. Every marriage has ups and downs. This isn't a down, it's a free fall, I insisted. I want us to talk to someone professional before it's too late. Her eyes narrowed. There's nothing wrong with us, Connor. You're making problems where there aren't any. I kept my voice level, the same tone I used to de-escalate tense situations on the job. I'm trying to save our marriage. Why are you fighting me on this? Because it's unnecessary. You want to tell some stranger all our private business because you're not getting enough attention. She slammed the dishwasher closed. Maybe if you weren't so needy, I wouldn't feel so suffocated all the time. Her words hit like a physical blow. Needy. I've been giving her space for months while still carrying my load at home and working full-time in one of the most dangerous districts in Chicago. That's when I knew. This wasn't about counseling. It was about us. Or rather, the fact that for Allison, there was no longer an us. 3 days after our failed weekend, I was working the graveyard shift when a call came in about a convenience store robbery. My partner and I were first on the scene. The perp was cornered and desperate, waving a gun at the terrified cashier. I talked him down, got him to surrender without anyone getting hurt. The adrenaline rush reminded me why I became a cop. To protect people, to make a difference. When I got home that morning, still riding the high of a clean arrest, Allison was in the kitchen making breakfast for the kids. I want to tell her about it, about how I'd connected with that scared kid holding the gun, saw something redeemable in him. Morning, I said, hanging up my jacket. She barely glanced up. Ethan has a dentist appointment at 3. Can you take him? I have to pick up Lily from her play date. No, how was your shift? No, glad you're home safe. Just logistics. Sure, I answered automatically. She slid a note across the counter with the dentist's address. Also, the dryer's making that noise again. That was it. Our entire exchange. She returned to packing lunch boxes while I stood there, invisible. Later that day, after taking Ethan to the dentist, I ran into my old partner Mike at the hardware store. I was picking up parts to fix the dryer. Connor Roberts. Man, it's been ages, he said, clapping me on the shoulder. How's life treating you? It's good. I lied automatically. Mike squinted at me. Yeah? You don't look good. Everything okay at home? Something about his directness broke through my defenses. Before I knew it, I was telling him everything over beers at the bar next door. Sounds rough, brother, Mike said when I finished. What are you going to do? I stared at my half-empty glass. What can I do? We've got the kids to think about. So what? You're just a co-parent now. A roommate who helps pay bills. Mike asked bluntly. His words struck like lightning. That's exactly what I had become. Not a husband, not a partner, just a co-parent. A utility. She doesn't see me anymore, Mike, I said, the realization washing over me. To Allison, I'm nothing more than a co-parent. Someone to pick up the slack with the kids, fix things around the house, and bring home a paycheck. Mike looked at me with something close to pity. And you're okay with that? I wasn't. Not even a little bit. But what choice did I have? That night, I lay awake next to Allison, replaying a moment from earlier. She'd been on the phone with her sister when I came in with the fixed dryer part. Hold on, she'd said into the phone, then cover the mouthpiece. Did you get the right part? When I nodded, she immediately went back to her conversation, not even acknowledging my effort. It wasn't about the dryer. It was what it represented. I was only valuable for what I could do, not who I was. My wife had told me, not in words but in 1,000 small actions, that I was nothing more than a co-parent. And the most painful realization was that I'd been accepting it, hoping things would change. They wouldn't. Not unless I changed them myself. The next morning, I made a decision that would change everything. If Allison saw me as nothing more than a co-parent, then that's exactly what I would become. No more try to reconnect. No more date nights. No more desperate attempts to rekindle what we once had. I got a call about a major drug bust happening that afternoon. Normally, I would have texted Allison to let her know I'd be late. This time, I didn't. I threw myself into the operation, leading the tactical team through a condemned apartment building. We seized over $2 million in product and arrested 3 high-level dealers. It was the kind of bust that would normally have me calling Allison the moment it was safe, wanting to share the victory. Instead, I went out for drinks with the squad. It was past midnight when I finally got home. Allison was waiting in the living room, arms crossed. Where were you? I called the station, and they said you left hours ago. Out with the guys, I said simply, heading for the stairs. You couldn't call? I was worried. I turned to face her. Were you worried about me, or worried about who would help with the kids tomorrow if something happened to me? Her stunned expression told me I'd hit a nerve. That's not fair, she said finally. Isn't it? I kept my voice even. When's the last time you asked about my day? About how I felt? About anything that wasn't related to the kids or the house? She had no answer for that. I'm going to bed, I said. I've got an early shift. That was the beginning. I started living my life on my terms. I took the overtime assignments I wanted. I joined the department's tactical training unit, something I'd been putting off because it required weekend commitments. I reconnected with friends I'd lost touch with. At home, I was a model father. I coached Ethan's Little League team, helped Lily with her science projects, never missed a school function. But I was done being the husband who begged for scraps of affection. I became exactly what Allison had reduced me to: detached, efficient, reliable for the kids, but emotionally unavailable to her. When she talked to me, I responded politely but briefly. When she asked for help, I provided it without complaint and without warmth. 2 weeks in, Allison cornered me in the garage as I was tuning on my motorcycle, another hobby I'd resurrected. What's going on with you? She demanded. I looked up from the engine. Nothing. Just doing some maintenance. You know that's not what I mean. You've been different. I shrugged. I'm the same as I've been for years. Just doing my job as a father and provider. And as a husband? She asked, a hint of uncertainty in her voice. I wiped my hands on a rag. What exactly do you want from me as a husband, Allison? Because for the past year, all you seem to want is someone to help with the kids and fix things around the house. I'm giving you exactly that. She stared at me, seemingly at a loss for words. If you figure out what else you want, let me know, I said, turning back to my motorcycle. But don't expect me to keep fighting for something you don't want anyway. As she walked away, I felt a strange mix of sadness and liberation. The man who had desperately wanted his wife's attention was gone. In his place was someone new, someone who refused to be taken for granted anymore. 3 months into my new approach to life, I barely recognized myself in the mirror. The daily workouts and boxing sessions had transformed my physique. The constant overtime and tactical training had sharpened my mind. I was sleeping better, despite the crazy hours, than I had in years. My captain called me in his office one Tuesday morning. Roberts, I've got an opening on the SWAT team. Your name came up. I'd wanted this for years, but had always turned down the opportunity because of the demanding schedule and risk factor. Allison had been adamantly against it. "I'm interested," I said without hesitation. "Training's intensive. 3 months, including 2 weeks in Quantico. You'll be away from home a lot." "Not a problem, sir." He studied me. "Something's different about you, Roberts. Can't put my finger on it." I just nodded. "When do I start?" That night, I told Allison over dinner. The kids were excited, bombarding me with questions about SWAT teams and hostage rescues. "Sounds dangerous," Allison said after the kids were in bed. "It's what I've always wanted," I replied, loading the dishwasher. "You never mentioned that before." "I mentioned it 8 years ago. You said no." Her eyes widened slightly. "And now you don't care what I think." "I care what you think about the kids, about their well-being. Beyond that." I shrugged. "You made it clear my feelings don't matter to you. Why should yours matter to me?" Harsh, maybe, but true. The next weekend, I had my first SWAT training session. Afterward, some of the guys invited me to a bar downtown. I hadn't been out socially in so long that it felt strange, but good. The bar was crowded, and I found myself talking to a woman named Rachel, a prosecutor with the DA's office. The conversation was easy, flowing naturally from work to books to travel. She laughed at my jokes, asked thoughtful questions, maintained eye contact. It had been so long since someone had shown genuine interest in me as a person that it felt almost surreal. "So, Connor," she said, sipping her whiskey, "tell me about yourself." "Married?" "Kids." "2 kids," I answered honestly. "Marriage is complicated." She raised an eyebrow, but didn't press. Instead, she changed the subject, telling me about a case she was working on. I found myself completely engaged in the conversation, offering insights from my police experience. "You should come by the office sometime," she suggested when we were saying goodbye. "We could use your perspective on some cases." She handed me her card, her fingers brushing mine. I didn't pull away. Walking to my car, I realized I hadn't thought about Allison once all evening. I'd been fully present, enjoying myself without the cloud of rejection hanging over me. When I got home, I found Allison waiting up, pretending to read a book. "Have a good time?" she asked too casually. "Yeah, actually. Met some interesting people." "People? Or women?" Her tone was sharp. I looked at her directly. "Both. Does it matter?" She didn't answer, just closed her book with a snap and headed upstairs. For the first time in a long time, I smiled to myself. Not because I wanted to hurt Allison or make her jealous, but because I'd rediscovered something I'd forgotten. I was worth being interested in. Worth talking to. Worth knowing. And if my wife couldn't see that, maybe someone else would. The SWAT training pushed me to my absolute limits. Each day brought new challenges. Tactical room entries, hostage scenarios, sniper certification, advanced weapons training. I thrived on it, rising to every challenge with a determination that impressed even the veteran instructors. Roberts has ice in his veins. I overheard my training officer tell the captain. Never seen someone so calm under pressure. The truth was, after years of walking on eggshells at my own home, simulated gunfire and flashbang grenades were almost relaxing. At least here, the threats were visible and the objectives clear. My 2 weeks at Quantico flew by. I'd never felt more alive, surrounded by men and women who share my passion for justice and protection. When I returned home, certified as Chicago PD's newest SWAT team member, the department arranged a small ceremony. To my surprise, Allison showed up with the kids. I hadn't expected her to come. I hadn't even told her about it. She must have heard from another officer's wife. "Daddy's a hero," Ethan announced, proudly touching the tactical badge on my uniform. "He's always been a hero," Lily added, hugging my waist. I caught Allison staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. It wasn't until later, when one of my female colleagues approached me for a photo, that I understood. It was jealousy. The woman, Sergeant Monica Torres, had trained with me at Quantico. She was smart, tough, and completely professional, but also undeniably attractive. "Great job in there, Roberts," she said, standing closer than strictly necessary. "We should celebrate sometime." I saw Allison watching us, her body language tense. When Monica walked away, Allison immediately appeared at my side, her hand possessively on my arm. "Who was that?" she asked, voice tight. "Sergeant Torres. We trained together. Seemed pretty friendly." I almost laughed at the irony. "She's a colleague, Allison." We respect each other's abilities. Is that all? She pressed. I removed her hand from my arm. You don't get to ask me that. Not anymore. The drive home was silent. After the kids were in bed, Allison approached me in the kitchen as I was making protein shake. You've changed, she said, watching me measure supplements. Yes, I agreed simply. The kids miss you. You're barely home. I'm home plenty. I coached Ethan's game last weekend and helped Lily with her science project yesterday. That's not what I meant. I put down the shaker bottle and faced her. What did you mean then? I miss you, she said, voice barely above a whisper. 5 months ago, those words would have been everything I wanted to hear. Now, they rang hollow. Which part of me do you miss exactly? I asked. The man who begged for your attention? Who tried everything to make you happy while you treated him like he was invisible? Because that man is gone. Her eyes filled with tears. I never meant to make you feel invisible. But you did. For years. I picked up my shake and headed for the door. I have an early shift tomorrow. As I climbed the stairs, I heard a notification on my phone. It was Rachel from the DA's office, asking if I was available to consult on a case. I found myself smiling as I typed my reply. Later that night, I lay awake thinking about how drastically my life had changed. The respect I now commanded at work. The new friendships I formed. The women who looked at me with actual interest, who valued my opinions and enjoyed my company. For the first time in years, I felt like a complete man again. Not just a father, not just a provider, but a person with his own identity and worth. My life had fallen into a new rhythm. SWAT training 3 days a week, regular shifts, and my limited but quality time with the kids. I'd started consulting with the DA's office on special cases, working closely with Rachel. Our professional relationship had developed into a friendship that I valued greatly. One evening, after wrapping up a difficult case involving a child trafficking ring, Rachel suggested we grab dinner. We ended up at a small Italian place downtown, discussing the case and decompressing from the emotional weight of it. You were incredible in there, Rachel said, twirling pasta on her fork. The way you connected those evidence threads, it's going to put that monster away for life. Just doing my job, I replied, though her praise felt good. No, it's more than that. You care. It shows in everything you do. Her words struck a chord. What had Allison last noticed or appreciated my dedication? My phone buzzed with a text from her, as if summoned by my thoughts. Kids in bed. When will you be home? I put the phone away without responding. It could wait. Everything okay? Rachel asked. Yeah, just home stuff. I changed the subject. Tell me about that brief you're working on for the appeals court. By the time we finished dinner, it was after 11. Rachel walked me to my car. Thanks for tonight, she said. It's rare to find someone who understands this work. I feel the same way, I admitted. There was a moment, a brief, electric moment, where we stood close enough that I could smell her perfume. She looked up at me, a question in her eyes. I stepped back slightly, not because I wanted to, but because despite everything, I was still married. Good night, Rachel, I said softly. She nodded, understanding in her gaze. Good night, Connor. When I got home, Allison was waiting in the living room, fury evident in her rigid posture. It's midnight, Connor. Where were you? Working a case, then dinner. I headed for the stairs. With her, that DA woman. I turned. Her name is Rachel. And yes, we closed a major trafficking case today. Is that all it was? Allison's voice had a razor edge. What are you implying? I'm not blind. I've seen how she looks at you. How all these women suddenly look at you. I laughed without humor. That's rich, coming from you. After years of treating me like I'm invisible, you're worried about other women seeing me? Are you sleeping with her? Allison demanded. The question hit like a slap. No, I'm not. But the fact that you'd ask that shows how little you know me now. What happened to us, Connor? Her voice softened, a hint of the old Allison breaking through. You happened. You decided I wasn't worth your attention anymore, that I was just good for paying bills and co-parenting. So I became exactly what you wanted. I never wanted this, she whispered. What did you want then? Because you made it pretty clear it wasn't me. She had no answer. I continued up the stairs, leaving her standing there with tears streaming down her face. In bed that night, I thought about Rachel, about the moment we'd shared. I hadn't crossed any lines, but for the first time, I'd wanted to. Not out of revenge or spite, but because it had been so long since someone had looked at me that way, like I mattered, like I was valuable beyond what I could provide. I came home from a grueling SWAT exercise to find the house unusually quiet. No TV blaring cartoons. No kids arguing over toys. Instead, there was soft music playing and the smell of something delicious cooking. "Allison," I called out, setting down my gear. She appeared from the kitchen wearing a dress I hadn't seen in years. Her hair was styled, makeup carefully applied. "Hey," she said with a hesitant smile. "I asked my sister to take the kids for the night." I raised an eyebrow. "Any particular reason?" "I thought we could use some time alone." She gestured toward the dining room, where the table was set with candles and wine glasses. "Dinner's almost ready." Cautiously, I showered and changed. When I came downstairs, Allison had served my favorite meal, her grandmother's lasagna recipe she hadn't made in at least 3 years. "This is unexpected," I said, taking a seat. "I've been doing a lot of thinking." She poured the wine, her hands slightly unsteady. "About us. About what you said." I took a sip, waiting. "You were right," she continued. "I've been taking you for granted, treating you like you were just there to help with the kids and the house." "What changed?" I asked, genuinely curious. "I did." She met my eyes directly. "Seeing you become this new person, confident, independent, it made me realize what I've been throwing away. Or it made you realize other women find me attractive now," I countered. She flinched slightly. "That's not fair, isn't it? You never showed interest in rekindling things until Rachel and Monica came into the picture. It's not about them." She reached for my hand across the table. "It's about us. About what we used to have." For a moment, I almost believed her. Then I remembered all the nights I tried to talk to her, all the dates she'd canceled, all the times I'd reached for her only to be pushed away. "We haven't had an us in a long time, Allison. And that was your choice, not mine." "I know." Tears welled in her eyes. "I took you for granted. I thought you'd always be there, no matter how I treated you. Then suddenly you weren't anymore. Not really. And I realized what I'd lost." After dinner, she moved closer on the couch, her hand finding mine. "I miss you, Connor. I miss us." When she leaned in to kiss me, I found myself responding briefly before pulling away. "What's wrong?" she asked. "This feels too little too late." I stood up, needing space. "You ignored me for years, Allison. Now that I've stopped begging for your attention, suddenly you want me back." "I made a mistake," she whispered. "A horrible mistake. But we can fix this." I looked at her, really looked at her. The woman I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. Once, I would have given anything to hear these words from her. But the man who had desperately wanted her validation no longer existed. "I don't know if we can," I said honestly. "I don't know if I want to try." "Because of her, Rachel." I shook my head. "This isn't about Rachel or anyone else. It's about me. About who I've become." She stood up, determination in her eyes. "I'm not giving up on us, Connor. I know I hurt you. I know I've got a long way to go to earn your trust back. But I'm going to try." Part of me wanted to believe her. Another part wondered if this was just a reaction to the possibility of losing what she'd taken for granted for so long. When she finally noticed I was gone, it was already too late. I'd changed too much to simply go back to the way things were. "I need time," I said finally. "I can't just flip a switch and forget the last few years." As I headed upstairs, I felt her watching me. Hope and fear mingled in her gaze. The irony wasn't lost on me. Now she was the one longing for attention that might never come. 6 months after Allison's first attempt to reconcile, our life had settled into a new pattern. She had been persistent, planning date nights, leaving notes in my lunch bag, making efforts to ask about my work. Small gestures that once would have meant everything to me. The kids noticed the change. "Mom's happier now," Lily observed one evening as I helped her with homework. "She laughs more." I nodded, not sure how to explain the complex emotions beneath the surface of our recalibrated marriage. Allison had joined a support group for police spouses, making genuine efforts to understand the stress of my job. She'd even started therapy on her own, something she'd refused when I suggested couples counseling years ago. One night, after the kids were asleep, she joined me on the back porch where I was enjoying a rare moment of quiet. "I've been thinking about us," she said, settling into the chair beside mine. "About whether you'll ever trust me again." I took a sip of my whiskey. "I don't know, Allison. I'm trying. But you're not there yet." "No," I admitted. "Sometimes I look at you, and all I can remember is how invisible I felt for so long. She nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. I understand. I did that to you. I can't undo it. No, you can't. Do you think you could ever love me again? The way you used to? It was the question we'd been circling for months. I don't know. I said honestly. That version of me is gone. I know. She wiped her eyes. I killed him with 1,000 cuts of indifference. Her raw honesty caught me off guard. She wasn't trying to manipulate me or minimize what had happened between us. She was finally taking responsibility. I reached across the space between us and took her hand. It wasn't forgiveness, not completely, but it was a start. I'm not making any promises, I said quietly, but I'm willing to see where this goes. The man who had once desperately craved her attention was indeed gone. In his place was someone stronger, someone who knew his worth regardless of whether she recognized it. That man could choose to stay or leave on his own terms. As she squeezed my hand, I realized something important. Whatever happened between us now would be a choice, not a desperate attempt to salvage something broken. We might build something new together, or we might part ways. But either way, I would never again accept being treated as nothing more than a co-parent, a provider, an afterthought. I had become exactly what she once reduced me to, and in doing so, I had found myself again.
Bye.